Well, Don, we got so many things happening over the last few days. We have so little time. We'll try and talk about as many as we can. I'm Dan Perkins.
I'm the tragedy of Vietnam continues. I'm Don Mazzella.
It's time for Two Guys from Verona. Each week, you will hear from Dan Perkins, a financial expert, a regular columnist for the Hill website, and best-selling author, and Don Mazzella, a veteran journalist, author, and radio host talking about things that concern you politically, financially, and socially. They will also try to give listeners a heads up on future happenings.
Well, Don, as we talked this afternoon, there's so many things going on. We'll try and cover as many as we possibly can in this first segment. We've got the questions being raised now about Hillary's health. The LA Times did a story over the weekend about her meeting with the young Latino reporter news people in Washington, D.C. last week, and how she fumbled the ball again trying to explain the lies of her lies about the email server. It was shocking that the LA Times would raise the question that she had a great week until Friday when she blew the whole thing up. Again, she was on the Sunday talk show, and it just can't seem to get her story straight. I mean, there's people that are talking to her that she's a habitual liar and that she's got health problems, but she there's something going on there. She just doesn't seem to be able to put the words together to get her message out unless it's on a teleprompter and somebody's written it for her. If she's in an impromptu situation, I don't know. I'm thinking about the debates coming up in September, whether or not she's going to request that she sees the questions before the debate so she can begin to study how she's going to answer.
Well, that's never been the way that's been in the past.
Well, I understand that, but we didn't have. I want to be careful here. We didn't have people of the caliber of Candy Crowley, who was trying to correct a presidential nominee when she was actually wrong, but she was working for the other party. It wouldn't surprise me that Hillary gets the questions because the media is on her side, and they want to give her the greatest opportunity to produce the greatest positive image. The other thing that happened yesterday, and I still scratch my head trying to figure out what the hell's going on here, is that Hillary was at a campaign stop in Orlando, and standing behind her was the father of the shooter at the club in Orlando that killed 49 or 50 people and injured scores more, who after the shooting, he put out a video on YouTube how against America and supported the continuation of the murder of gays and lesbians. And he was standing behind Mrs. Clinton on the stage in Orlando. I don't understand why anybody would even begin to think about taking that kind of a security risk with a nominee for the president of the United States, because there might have been some upside, but there's some huge downside if something ugly would have happened. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's take one thing at a time. If Donald Trump is smart, he would exploit this liar issue because it's one that's hanging heavily in the Hillary campaign. And as you keep pointing out, she puts these bright objects in front of him so he won't get to that point. But if he does, particularly in a debate, and asks a simple question, well, did you lie to the American people or didn't you? How she answers that question will go a long way in this election. That's number one. Number two, I agree with you. There's when you sent me the picture of Hillary, it was like two men were helping an old lady up the steps.
Mm-hmm.
It was a sad commentary. Earlier last year, I said to you, I had heard from the Hillary camp that there was something wrong with her, but then she got a subsequent bill of health a clean bill of health from a doctor. But you know what? Like everything else with the Clintons, you have to take it with a grain of salt. And as for that father out there behind her, you know, whatever symbolic um, uplift she would have gotten is going to be killed by people like us who question it.
Right.
So, all in all, I kind of agree with you. Even though the polls show her 9 points up in Pennsylvania and even are a little bit above in Ohio. But, you know, I have a hunch those polls will change.
Yeah.
And I have a hunch of Trump can hold his own, as you keep saying, to the end of the month. It's over.
Yeah. Well, I said to you in our discussion earlier this afternoon, Michael Dukakis said, ladies and gentlemen, you have to hear this. When I said Michael Dukakis, Don said, who? I said, right. Michael Dukakis, who was the governor of Massachusetts, who was running, and in June, he was 15 points up, and he got destroyed in the election. I'm not saying that necessarily is going to happen, although I believe that Mr. Trump will win by the widest margin, a much wider margin than the media is willing to admit. But I do think that.
Can I just interrupt you?
Sure.
One of the most ridiculous events in American history was putting Dukakis inside a tank, as if he was driving a tank. Do you remember that scene?
With the helmet.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I heard this afternoon that they said that politics can change rapidly, and that he lost that election, that presidential election, because of two things. One was the picture of him in the tank with the helmet, where he looked like a doofus, and number two was the Willie Horton ad.
Yes.
Where he released this prisoner from jail, and he went on to do some terrible things. So it can turn. I do believe, though, that, as I said, for our listeners, I have a new piece on the Daily Surge that was out yesterday, the lead article yesterday, and it talks about the title is Mr. Trump's Watch This Bright Shiny Object. I believe that when Hillary told us prior to the Democratic convention that, and then reinforced it, that she's not going to talk about policy by and large in the month of August, she's going to focus her attack on the person of Donald Trump.
Yes.
And she's out to destroy him, which was the Clinton playbook that they used when Bill was running against Bush 41. And by the end of August, the election was over because they had done such an excellent job of destroying his character. But I think things are different today. They're spending tens of millions of dollars in advertising, and I'm not sure that. And I said to you before, if Trump comes out the end of August with being close to her or tied with her, all of that great lead she supposedly got from the Democratic convention and the impact of the money that she spent is going to create a situation where she's going to be in serious trouble, because she's brought out the big guns, trained them on him for almost a month solid, with herself, the president saying he's unfit to serve, and now she's got a situation where people are beginning to question her ability physically. And Trump has been saying all along, not just recently, he didn't think that she was strong enough to handle the presidency.
Well, I agree on that point. You know, it's a story. You at Georgia Tech, when I went there, there was a teacher. They call him the Aluminum Man, because he wrapped himself every day in aluminum, and he was a professor. And what happened was that he got straight 4.0s throughout his career in electrical engineering. And when he finally got his diploma, he walked halfway across the stage and had a nervous breakdown. And the only thing he could do after that was teach electrical engineering. But he walked around literally because he didn't want the raise. I only say that because she has been so single-minded at seeking the presidency that if she does get it, she may, in effect, say, well, what do I do now? Because let's also not forget, whoever becomes president is going to have a lot of problems the first 100 days in office. If it's Hillary, she's got a hostile Congress. I don't believe the Democrats will take either house. If it's Trump, he's failed to do the one critical thing to lead the Republican Party and reach across.
Yeah.
He antagonized the speaker. Is it time to take a break?
Yes, sir. We've got to take a break. So this is Dan Perkins.
And Don Mazzella.
We're the two guys from Verona. And go to our website, twoguysfromverona.com, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome back. You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. Once again, here's your hosts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
You know, Dan, I've covered a lot of wars, as you know, more than I care to count. I kind of cut my teeth in Vietnam, and I learned a lot there, mainly how sweet life is. But something happened this week, which you're very familiar with. I met this very nice man last Christmas Day. He was the friend of a woman we always spend Christmas with. And he was the light colonel in the Air Force. He flew Thunderbolts. He flew any number of aircraft. And then he worked for Republic Aviation testing planes. You may or may not be aware, but there was a big facility out there. Well, he was really happy. Our friend was very happy. But we just found out today that he committed suicide last week. It's sad. He had children. He was a widower. He was embarking on a relatively new life with our friend. But he had, what do you call it,
PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Well, and then when I was telling you about it, you hit me with a very shocking fact that I've heard you say before, but you never really get the impact until something like this happens.
Right.
One veteran an hour,
Yes.
almost,
Yes.
dies from that. Now, he was the Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
which I think was the war we won in terms of armed forces, but lost in terms of public opinion. I've seen a lot of things in my time, and at Christmas time, it was his first time at this large gathering, and he and I exchanged war stories. And we sat at a sofa and talked about it for almost an hour and a half, and we laughed. And he was the last person I think about it. But we have a problem in this country that people like you with your foundation and a lot of the people we talk to are veterans. What have we done for them? What more can we do? And how can we make them feel respected and welcomed? As you know, at the end of World War II, we managed to escape a depression because there was so much pent-up demand and savings that when people came back to war, from the war, American soldiers, don't forget, we demobilized 11 million men and women at the end of World War II in a relatively short time. It's hard to believe, but we welcomed them back. Some of them didn't adjust, but most of them did. Someone said the greatest generation, but it seems that we're running into a problem with our Korean War veterans, with our Vietnam veterans, with our Iraqi War veterans. It is something that concerns me. For this man, who seemed to have everything together to commit suicide, I am very sad. and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Don. You know, it's not a pleasant subject to talk about at all, but it has to be talked about. In the work that my wife and I have done with our foundation, Songs and Stories for Soldiers, we now have close to 9,000 veterans who have our MP3 system. And we have 42 hospitals. We just got, and other facilities, we just got the Warrior and Transition Unit for the 101st Airborne at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. This is now going to be in our program. The real challenge, Don, is that some soldiers can deal with the stress of battle more so than others. It's the others that cause the greatest amount of challenge. We opened up the Baltimore Station Homeless Shelter in Baltimore, Maryland, with our program a year ago in July. I was back in the fall, in the next 2 months in September, and I met a gentleman who told me he was a Vietnam War veteran and he had been fighting PTSD for 40 years. He said, I've tried every drug, legal and illegal, to try and deal with this, and nothing's worked for me. He said, I was one of the fortunate few who got your MP3 player, and I listened to the sleep music. And he said, I don't sleep well every night, but I sleep more nights than I have in a long, long time. See, the problem, Don, is that with post-traumatic stress disorder, one of the biggest challenges is sleep deprivation. And in order for the body to heal and the soul and mind to heal, the body has to get to what is called REM level sleep. When a soldier is in a military hospital or a VA hospital, the way normally they're treated is that they're drugged. Opioids, as you used to call them in our last week's program. Opioids do not allow the body to get to REM level sleep. In fact, the body resists going to sleep down to REM level because of the drugs in their body. So what happens is that the soldier doesn't get any sleep. When they don't get any sleep, it's just like everybody else. If you and I were up for days at a time and had very little sleep, we probably don't make very good decisions. And in the case of the soldier, with sleep deprivation, it's not uncommon to see them take their own lives because it's almost a hallucinogenic state because they're so sleep deprived they don't make reasonable decisions. The other issue with the suicide is if we want to go back in time and you want to go back to your World War II and your Vietnam and Korean War examples, things changed dramatically when we did the first Desert Storm and then Desert Shield and then Iraq and Afghanistan. What's happening, Don, is because the president has so reduced the military forces, soldiers are responsible for having to serve multiple tours of duty with very little R&R time. I happened to listen to a discussion between a Vietnam veteran and an Afghanistan veteran, and the Vietnam veteran said, I have all the respects in the world for you guys. You had it much harder than we did. And the Afghanistan veteran said, why? He said, because we did a tour and we went home for a year, and maybe we went back and maybe we didn't. You do a tour and you're home for 30 days, 45 days, and you're back in combat again and again and again and again. And I think that the movie American Sniper is less about the sniper and more about the impact of post-traumatic stress disorder and how it destroys individuals. And so we have a problem. We have according to the VA, about 26 million veterans in the United States currently right now. And the VA estimates that about a minimum of a third, have PTSD. And they could be from Second World War, Korean War, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq. I met some gentlemen 2 weeks ago from the Disabled Veterans of America. They served in Vietnam. They're still fighting PTSD. Okay, with that, we run out of time on this segment. So this is Dan Perkins.
Don Mansella.
And remember, if it's important to you, it's important to us. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsor.
You're listening to Two Guys from Verona with Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella. Welcome back. You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. Once again, here's your hosts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
Don, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I'll give you a lead in. It's jobs and money. Those are the two things that this election is going to be decided upon. You want to talk about money, and I want to talk about the jobs.
Okay.
So you first.
Okay. Several months ago, I wrote a piece, and I talked about it on this show, and that was that some of the pundits were saying to investors, sell and go to cash. Sell everything and go to cash. And I'm talking people like Bill Gross, the Bond King. All of them were talking about a lot of big names in money management were saying sell and go to cash. And I said to you and to our audience that as a registered investment advisor with 40 some years of experience, 43, almost 44 years of experience in managing money, that I was angry at these people because when you sell and go to cash, you're not going to earn anything on it, and you need money to live, especially people who are in retirement, who would be selling stocks that were paying dividends and selling bonds, even though they were paying a low rate of interest, and earning nothing on their money. And as a result, in order to pay their bills to survive, they're going to have to begin to liquidate assets. Now, I just thought that was an incredibly terrible piece of advice, because the only way a person, if their money's not generating any income for them, the only way they can pay their bills is to begin to liquidate their capital. And when you start liquidating capital to pay your bills, you're going to run out of money. And that means you're going to be destitute. And that means you're going to be in poverty, and you're going to have to sell your house and your car, probably have to sell your children, loan your wife out. I mean, anything to generate income. So I think they made a terrible mistake. Well, people were calling them today saying, the NASDAQ hit a new high, and the S&P 500 and the Dow are close to new highs. But, you talk about this is really about money and jobs. Well, yesterday, we got an insight of Mr. Trump and how he's thinking about money and then ultimately jobs. So I listened to his speech, and I listened to the things that he's talked about. And there were three things that I thought were important in his speech. There were other things, but these three things stuck to me as being tools to deal with your side of the equation, and that's jobs. Number one, he wants to reduce the corporate income tax rate from 35%, one of the highest in the world, to 15%. He wants the corporations to be encouraged to invest because they'll generate more profits, not less. Number two, and I don't know how good the number is, but I have seen estimates that there is in excess of $2 trillion in corporate cash outside of the United States that the corporations do not want to repatriate back because the 35% tax rate is just too high. He's proposing an amnesty program, in essence, for corporate cash to bring it back into the United States for a tax of 10%. $2 billion that could come into the United States with a 10% haircut means we're going to have, $2 trillion. We're going to have $1.8 trillion of money that can come into this economy, and that can help when you think that the economy of the United States is only running about $16 trillion. So you're talking almost 10% of the GDP of this country that could come in cash through repatriation. On top of that, he wants to, for individuals, he wants to eliminate the death taxes, the federal estate taxes. Now, I know that there's a lot of people in the middle class who don't have to worry about that with the $5 million exemption. But I would say to you that if Mr. Trump is elected and he does want to help build America, and he wants small businesses, which is your forte, to grow and develop, it's possible that small businesses in a booming economy can generate significant wealth for those people who have the risk they're willing to take and start a new business. So the elimination of the estate taxes, it's interesting. There are only 2 states left in the union that have state estate taxes. Would you care to guess what one of them might be?
New Jersey.
You got it. Where you live.
Well,
It's punitive. So, so Trump in his economic speech yesterday is giving us some clearer pattern of what he wants to do from an economic standpoint. The one thing that he talked about energy independence, but what he didn't go for was my idea of the idea of taxing imported oil. We're shutting oil wells, but we're importing 4 million barrels a day from Mexico and Saudi Arabia and all over the world. I think we should put a $15 a barrel import tax to come into the Treasury of the United States if they want to come in, and let the American oil industry, who shut huge numbers of wells and got hundreds of millions of barrels in storage, let that start to flow into our economy and put people back to work. So I think he's on the right track. He's got something for small business people to think about, big corporations to think about repatriation of earnings and what they would do with them. I think he wants to do something about jobs. So what do you think?
well, what I'm looking at is the muted reaction of the press. If that had been Obama, it would have been headlines galore. And if that had been Hillary talking, it would have been headlines galore. But that's a ho-hum approach. Not even what's leading the New York Times tonight is the fact that a Republican senator is not supporting him, not his action plan, but they're not supporting him. But having said that, listened to you and listened to other people, and tried to follow along. It's a good start. He's got to hammer away at this as much as he can. But to me, the real thing out of all this is, as we predicted, we had a good jobs number. Everything else went to hell in a basket, but the jobs numbers showed right up there at 225, whatever the number is. But as John Crudell, who I've been trying to get on this program, who I think you would love, is the straightest shooting columnist I've run across in a long time. Points out the numbers are all fake. They have nothing whatsoever to do with reality, and in fact, I think twist reality to fit a picture. I'd be curious what the September numbers come out for August, and then again the October 1 numbers. But you'll see an upward track, but I don't think it's there. I think we are going to be stuck with this slow-moving economy, at least for the rest of this year and the first 100 days of the next administration, whichever it may be. I'll put it back to you.
Well, you're interesting. You talk about the first 100 days. There's another article today was talking about the impact of negative interest rates in those countries that have them. Negative interest rates are designed by the central bank to force people to go into the stock market or to make investments, to take risk, so that negative interest rates means that you really virtually have to pay to give your money to the government to buy bonds or certificates of deposits or whatever at the banking sector. I really don't think, if Mr. Trump were to be elected the president, I don't think. I mean, he could possibly do something about the federal tax rate, because he talked about using the legislation that had already passed the House with the tax rates that he's talking about, which were the House tax rates. That might get out of the House in 100 days. But as to fixing the economy, he's not going to. I don't think he's going to accomplish a lot. I mean, if you look at what happened, I remember when Ronald Reagan was running for president, and as I said, he was supposedly down 15 points, and I remember that, and I remember where I was. I was in Frankfurt, Germany, the night that Ronald Reagan was elected, and he didn't do a lot in his first 100 days as terms of changing anything physically in the government. What he did do was he changed the psychology dramatically, because under Carter, we were much like where we are today. We had high unemployment, incredible inflation, huge interest rates, and we were told that America's best years were behind us. He came in and said there's something better, and he began to change the psychology of the American people long before he was physically able to change the economy through Congress and create a significant boom to the economy with jobs and productivity.
Dan, I'm going to interrupt you here and say one thing. Don't you think Donald Trump has changed the psychology of the American people? I mean, the press and the media says one thing, but people say another. What do you think?
I don't think that Trump. I would be so bold as to challenge your logic and say, I don't think that Trump changed the attitude of the American people. Ronald Reagan changed the attitude. What I do believe is that Donald Trump tapped into a feeling that was already there but had no leader. And he became the leader of that movement to change things for the better. And so he's evolved as a leader of that movement. But I think that anger, that frustration of the establishment and the elite was already there, much like it was in England before the vote. I think it's there. I think it's strong. It's powerful. He's made it stronger. He's attracted more people, Democrats and Republicans and independents. And I think he really has changed things. But he didn't start it. It was already there. He just tapped into it, if they say. And we have to move on again. So this is Dan Perkins.
Don Mazzella.
And these are the two guys from Verona, and we'll be right back after this message from our sponsors.
Offer their predictions on what is going to happen in our world.
Well, Don, last segment. Your turn. Go.
Well, okay. As you're aware, A-Rod Rodriguez announced his retirement Sunday morning from the New York Yankees. They gave him his $27 million for next year, but in effect told him to take a hike. What they said was that he would ride the bench for the rest of the year, or he could go out in a blaze of glory. 3 games in Boston today, tomorrow, and Thursday, and then one last game on Friday, and he took the package. But it's been the reaction is very interesting. On Fan, the radio station, Sunday, I was coming home listening. The fans were all aglow about all he had achieved until this one guy from Montclair called up and said, but he cheated. He was suspended from baseball for a year in some games. He admitted, after lying directly to the camera many times, that he did take drugs and performance enhancement drugs. And yet here we are praising this man. My question is, the newspapers are very interesting. The Daily News, which has become very liberal, and the New York Post, which has become very conservative, both had almost the same headline on their back page. It read simply, "Don't let the door hit you on the way out, because you're a liar and you're a cheat." My question is, are the American people, do they really forgive and forget liars and cheaters? I don't know, but Hillary Clinton's going to find out. Back to you.
So Friday's his last game. He's going to get paid the rest of this season. And if I heard you correctly, they're going to pay him $27 million not to play next year because of his contract.
Yes.
Hell of a deal, Don.
Yes. Except, as one person put it, he lives, eats, and breathes baseball. What's he going to do afterwards? But the real question is...
Count his money.
And his starlets.
Yeah.
It's a real good question. But what I point out is, how will he make the Hall of Fame? Don't forget, he's just 4 home runs shy of 700 home runs. And at one point, he was a cinch to do it, and he never made it. If he had played the season that he was suspended, he would have made it with ease. A lot of things were denied him, but a lot of things were given him. They say he's a natural player, but he chose to use drugs. And then to lie. The worst part was to lie about it, and that's the saddest part.
Well, what about the guy from St. Louis? I can't remember his name, who broke the home run record.
They mentioned him. He hasn't made it. He or Barry Bonds.
So
he's bad when you...
Okay, but what I'm saying is that the people who cheated, will the sports writers ever vote them in? People who have been known to use performance-enhancing drugs, will they go in to the Hall of Fame? Will the sports writers who vote for who goes into the Hall of Fame, at least the current bunch of them, will they put people, or have they put people in the Hall of Fame that who have lied and cheated the American people?
Oh, on this one, no. But the interesting thing, as the American Medical Association pointed out, we began a slippery slope when we started permitting doctors to prescribe copious amounts of opioids. Mm-hmm. Who knows, 10 or 20 years from now, we'll have a different set of sports writers who will think differently than this bunch.
Now, Pete Rose didn't get in the Hall of Fame, did he?
Well, that's not because he bet on baseball games, but he's still not in there, right, which is a shame.
Yeah, but did he cheat?
The answer is no. No one can say that he threw a game. It's just that he bet on the games.
Right. Okay.
To me, there's a big difference.
Okay. Okay. So how are the Yankees doing?
Well, right now they got the best farm system in the world and no players, and they still charge $125 to $250 for a seat. As someone pointed out, a father, wife, and 2 children will spend over $600 to go to one Yankee game.
And watch them lose.
But the point is, that's expensive.
Sure it is.
You think about it.
Absolutely.
But in fact, the ironic part, as you know, I have New York Jet tickets, and I'm on the 50-yard line. Yet I sell them every year and make back my money, and I see the games better on TV.
Right.
And that's what the NFL is beginning to realize.
Oh, okay. Well, we're coming up on the end of our program. It was an interesting program with so many different subjects to be talked about. Hopefully we're going to have a guest, which I know the audience will enjoy next week. So for now, this is Dan Perkins.
Don Mazzella.
And remember, if it's important to you, it's important to us. Go visit us at twoguysfromverona.com, and we'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Two Guys from Verona with Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella. For more information about Dan and Dawn, please visit twoguysfromverona.com. Tune in again next week to hear two guys from Verona give their unique take on today's world. Until then, have a great day, and remember to keep faith in America.